Today's video, I'm going to talk about the 3 commonly overlooked opportunities for ROI, saving millions of dollars when you're deploying a new IT service management solution. If that's of interest to you, keep watching. Hi, I'm Jeff Jameson, president of Whitlock Infrastructure Solutions, and we help enterprise IT on their journey to next generation IT operations. So let's get into this. There are 3 areas that we often see customers miss when they're looking at ROI and the investments that they make in new IT service management solutions. There are certainly plenty of opportunities, and you'll see a lot of companies today focusing on SaaS for sure, and the inherent savings that you get when deploying solutions on SaaS. Well, that's low-hanging fruit. We assume everybody understands what those savings are. But when you start to dig into this, there are some areas that we think are often overlooked, and that's what I'd like to talk about. So number 1 is the avoidance of expensive upgrades. And I'm going to use that word very specifically, upgrades. Whenever customers look at deploying any new application, probably not unique to IT service management, when I'm not sure that they sit back and think about the costs associated with a potential upgrade. It almost sounds like you're admitting failure before you've started. And so I think it's left out because of that reason, right? You'll sit down, start to plan, and there will be costs associated with procuring software, consulting services, the hosted environment, whether it's on premises or whether it's in somebody's cloud or it's a SaaS hosted environment, et cetera. And there are other costs, staffing, training, a whole host of those things. But rarely do I think customers take sort of a look in the mirror and say, and likely 3 years from now, we're probably going to have an expensive upgrade. They think they're going to avoid that. They're going to deploy a new service management solution, and there might be annual updates or the opportunity to take on some new enhancements and things, but nobody thinks about this big upgrade. But it almost always comes. And so how do you avoid that? If you're going into this assuming that there's not going to be an upgrade, then how do you think about it? How do you plan? And I think the key to this is understanding that nothing ever goes perfectly well. I talked in a previous video about proper, thorough planning. And it requires in that planning process this idea of acknowledging that we need a strategy and a platform that is designed specifically to update, not upgrade. There's a big difference in those two. The idea that you're typically building out a solution that is highly customized, that has lots of integrations, that might be being used for things other than IT service management. It creates this big platform that all of a sudden you're stuck in. The idea of an upgrade all of a sudden becomes sometimes a re-implementation because the changes are so significant, the impact is so significant, and we'll often see customers that have deployed a net new solution 3 years hence after their SaaS agreement has expired, put an RFP out to start all over again. And that's exactly the reason, is that they've gotten to a point where an upgrade is really re-implementation. So thinking about that in advance and working hard to build out a platform that you're not customizing as much, that you're taking advantage of best practices. I know there are customers out there that make the conscious decision that the platform for service management will be a platform used for multiple things. It will have high customizations, and accept that and understand it and plan for it. Know that downstream, it might not be 3 years, it might be 5 years, it might even be 10 years. There will be a re-implementation coming, and they accept that, and that's okay. I'm talking about those instances, and we've seen it time and time again, where customers get to a 2-year, 3-year, 4-year point, and they realize, wow, we're going to either have to do a massive upgrade or we're going to have to re-implement. That's where I'm targeting this, and I think that's where the bulk of our customers, or at least people that we've engaged with at some level, that's where they fall, is in this area of upgrade, re-implement, and having to make that tough decision. And that's a tough one to go back to leadership and say, we're going to start all over again because the cost to upgrade is so expensive. So that's number one. And I think that's the area that has the biggest opportunity for ROI. Reimplementation, we're talking millions of dollars. Starting over is going to be millions of dollars at an enterprise scale. And so thinking about that and planning for it versus being surprised by it is something I strongly encourage. Number two is, again, independent of SaaS or on premises, it is problem management, proactive problem management. It is one of the key processes to drive huge savings that just gets overlooked. Most customers, and understandably so, start with request, incident, change. Those are the areas that drive most activity in initial deployments of service management solutions. Problem management requires maturity, requires configuration management. It requires, processes across the board to be in place, effective, and trusted. However, it's an area, if you can get to that point, there are huge savings. This one falls into, again, this Pareto's rule idea of typically what we see when customers have events or incidents, there are a few noisy things in their IT environment. Sort of 20% of the infrastructure creates 80% of the events or incidents. And that is typically tracked on a spreadsheet. Even if the ticketing system or the tool used has a way to capture that, it's usually exported into a spreadsheet and then analyzed. Not frequently. And we find that many customers do not have problem managers assigned to this. So there's got to be somebody responsible for problem management. And then somebody must have the tools to be able to quickly analyze problems and understand where to attack. That's really difficult to do when looking at a spreadsheet, especially when the environment, the IT infrastructure is changing so dramatically, so quickly. It's hard to really zero in and see problems or understand the root cause of some of these problems and being able to get to those in an efficient manner. So it starts with, yes, there's process, there's people, but also having a tool, a technology that allows you to leverage modern day analytics. Big popular topic today, and it should be embedded inside your IT service management solution and allow you to kind of feed that information into sort of a heat map perspective and have that person that's assigned for problem management be able to look quickly and understand where are the first opportunities to go after to address some key problems. Third on the list is ease of configuration. That might seem like an obvious one, but again, I think this often gets overlooked. And here's why. The idea that you're typically deploying an initial service management solution and bringing in a consulting firm, they're responsible for that. So it's been delegated to a certain extent. And it's not always understood, I believe, well, what are the skills associated with doing that configuration? How frequently will I need that skill? What are those skills that I have inherently in-house? Will I have to hire for those? Ease of configuration, not just the cost of the initial deployment, the overall cost on the lifetime use of that product. What is the ease of the configuration? I'll give an example. Adding a drop down. So the idea that you just want to put a simple new drop down on a screen will require, in many tools today, will require requirements gathering, will require a vetting of possible solutions. There will be probably costs that will have to be determined that are outside of the organization. So a consulting firm, what are those costs? User acceptance testing, all of the things associated with going live with when you're making changes to a production system. I'm not suggesting that you can avoid all of those things when you have something that's more of a drag and drop based approach, but they'd all be reduced significantly. And the need to bring in external consulting firms would be reduced. You can have internal staff that's responsible for admin now able to do some of the basic configuration changes that often require developers. So now you've reduced the cost or the need to hire developers. You've reduced the time it takes to get through that because the requirements may dictate some complex programming is required. That's all got to be tested and vetted. When it's just a drag and drop, all of that's compressed at a much more effective time frame. The risk for doing harm or damage in a release gets reduced. And now you're able to take on this agile approach as customers and users come to the IT staff for changes, they can be implemented quickly. What we often see is as those requests come in, and as the teams are researching the complexity associated with it, then another request comes in. And next thing you know, they're thinking, well, wait a minute, this is now turning from a small change to a small project. And then as you look into more requirements, small projects turn into big projects, turns into upgrades. And so we see that occur very often as changes and requests for changes come in or improvements to the system. It escalates really fast because of the nature of how the configuration is done or the development work is required. So looking for a platform or a tool that can be used in a drag and drop wizard or GUI driven basis can have a huge impact on ROI. The three items that I'm discussing are items that, again, don't typically show up at the beginning of this process of planning all of the spend associated with a new solution. Again, if you go back and look at why go to SaaS, and there's that, as I mentioned, this low-hanging fruit, there's saving in servers and databases and the costs associated with maintaining that, and the floor space and racks and all of that stuff. Okay, that's great. But that's easy. That's easy to find those. It's when you start digging deeper and looking for sort of that hidden gold in there, and you'll uncover millions of dollars in these three items because they are hard. But when you when you solve these, that's why they're so valuable. It's doing the heavy lifting associated with the planning process, the deployment process, and then the ongoing care and feeding of that. And it's easy to skim that because you can find quick savings, in SaaS-based models and new pricing structures and subscription licensing, and all of that looks appealing and it looks great on paper and it does save millions of dollars. But there are even more millions underneath that. But it does require patience. It requires hard work. It requires some help to take a different perspective, to look at these and all of the impacting infrastructure, resources, processes. So in summary, I've covered three commonly overlooked opportunities to drive much better ROI when deploying a new IT service management solution. Number one is to look for a solution or a platform that allows you to update, not upgrade. That is, again, I think it's the biggest opportunity for ROI because that's not something you'll plan for at the outset. So looking for ways to stay in line with best practices, stay aligned to the way the tool is designed to work, and making sure that you can stay current on an annual basis, just do those regular updates and you avoid that big ticket upgrade. Secondly, work on maturity of processes, particularly processes that drive big ROI like problem management. Avoid pursuing the incidents, the outages. That you've got to do that, but focusing on that, leads you astray from where the big money is. Those problems, those root causes, it requires a lot more work and it requires more maturity in all of your other processes. But when you do it, it's well worth it. And lastly, ease of configuration. It's one thing to outsource an initial deployment. What's that long-term care look like? How easy is it to maintain the tool? What kind of skills do you need? When you look at that year over year over year, when you're outsourcing a lot of that configuration versus doing that in-house, it starts to add up and that turns into millions of dollars as well. So hopefully when you look at all three of these, you can see that you can quickly get into $3, $4, $5, $6, $8 million worth of savings on a total cost of ownership on a 3 to 5 year implementation of an IT service management solution. So where do you go from here? If you've got a solution that you feel like you're a bit trapped, you're stuck, you're looking for more ROI, you're looking for more agility, where to begin? It goes back to that thorough planning idea of making sure that you are taking into account all aspects and not just looking at quick wins. Yeah, you always want to build quick wins into any sort of deployment, but you don't base your planning on quick wins. You base it on the long-term wins. That means you've got to sit down with somebody that can bring in some of that expertise that's seen these from many different angles, different industries, different size organizations, and the same sorts of problems get repeated over and over. And so it's that slow down. We want to get you to agile. Sounds contradictory, but slow down and get that planning done, get it right the first time. One of the other things that we offer our customers is to do a real value workshop, a value assessment. So sit down, we work with a third-party ecosystems that has a fantastic model that allows us to plug in all of the unique differences from an organizational perspective: size of company, cost of infrastructure, cost of resources, anything that touches an IT service management solution, and any cost associated with outages and impact to the business. All of that can be imported into the system, and it generates those value points, the areas of biggest opportunity based on your unique footprint, your unique infrastructure, your unique business model. And it's a couple day process that allows us to go back and forth with your input, that generates an independent perspective on ROI. And it's really enlightening. And every time we do one of these, we always find things that we didn't realize or we didn't expect. And it's certainly enlightening for customers. There's always some hidden, piece of information that just jumps out that you thought you'd seen all of the possible, value messages, the outcomes that are meaningful, but there's no one size fits all. And that's the beauty of the tool. It takes into account the unique nature of every customer, and it provides each of the key opportunities for savings. And it's a great platform to use as a starting point to take to leadership to say, here's the justification for moving forward. And it's every customer has seen tremendous value from going through these workshops. Well, that's it. Hope you enjoyed this video. As I mentioned at the outset, I know this is not a comprehensive list, but certainly the three most common overlooked items that we see from an ROI perspective when deploying an IT service management solution. I'd love to hear from you. Let me know if you agree, disagree, you have some other areas that you would share with the audience. It'd be great to get other perspectives. If you're interested to work with us or look for opportunities in your environment to find some of this uncovered ROI, we are happy to help. We offer both a value first workshop that begins planning, or we can go to one of the ROI analysis workshops as well. It'd be great to work with you. Thanks for listening.